Morning glory, America. I believe the West is saved. Liz Truss becomes prime minister today, and Liz Truss is a Browns fan. I kid you not. All will be well with the United Kingdom. In all seriousness, she is going to be a very good prime minister. It has taken Great Britain 4 tries. They have had 12 years of conservative government, 4 prime ministers. It began with David Cameron, who's basically a centrist Democrat in the United States. Then they went to Theresa May, who was a little bit to the right of David Cameron, but not much, and really didn't know how to negotiate Brexit. Then Boris arrived to blow up any idea that they could get out of the European Union without fisticuffs, and he got it done. Thank you. And he also came to the aid of Ukraine. Thank you, Boris Johnson. But now, 4th time's a charm. The Tories have a Tory running the party and the government, and they have a big majority. Now, will she use it? She kisses hands with the Queen. The first time that has ever occurred at Balmoral, which will happen later today. Boris Johnson exited number 10 in London this morning. Had this to say. Do we have a Boris Johnson clip somewhere here? Yes. Cut number 4, please.
Thank you. Well, this is it, folks. Thank you, everybody, for coming out so early this morning. In only a couple of hours, I will be in Balmoral to see Her Majesty the Queen. And the torch will finally be passed to a new Conservative leader. The baton will be handed over in what has unexpectedly turned out to be a relay race. They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now. And through that lacquered black door, a new Prime Minister will shortly go to meet a fantastic group of public servants. The people who got Brexit done. The people who delivered the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, and never forget, 70% of the entire population got a dose within 6 months, faster than any comparable country. That is government for you. That's this Conservative government.
Now, Boris Johnson may be back. He is the sort of individual who may be back. I would not write Boris off, but I hope the cabinet that marches in number 10 later today when Prime Minister Liz Truss returns is as conservative as they come, that they cut taxes, slash regulations, and stand up to Russia and China. That's it. I got to talk about her last night on Special Report with Brett Baer, cut number 16.
Hugh, we ended on that piece out of the new Prime Minister in the UK. We'll start there with the panel. As you take a look at Liz Truss, the Washington Post editorial just releases the Thatcher parallel is revealing, though it has its limits. Like her hero, Truss, 47, does not hail from the privileged wing of the ruling Conservative Party. She attended a government school, but she appeared at the first candidates debate in July wearing a white shirt with a bow on the front. And she said the Iron Lady was a bit relentless. What about Liz Truss and what Americans need to know about the new prime minister?
I'm hopeful about it, Brett. The most important thing Americans need to know is that in a British parliament of 650 seats, the Tories control 357 and a few more from the Union Nationalists of Ireland, from Northern Ireland. She got a huge majority, which she's got to use, and she's vowed to use it very quickly. She's going to staff her government by tomorrow night, going to slap a freeze on energy prices for every one of the 28 million households in Great Britain, and she's going to unleash energy production by removing a ban on fracking, stand strong with Ukraine, put the nuclear submarines in the process of procurement. If she moves as fast as Maggie Thatcher did, the whole world will be better served for it. Very exciting times in Great Britain.
And I do think it could be a great prime ministership. Now, to be a great prime minister, you have to last a lot longer than 2 years. So she has an election coming up in 2024. If she loses it, that'll be over for her. She has to win that election. That means she has to deliver right away. And that means you've got to go very hard, very fast on energy. You've got to go very hard, very fast on removing impediments to building houses. You've got to go very far, very fast on rebuilding the national defenses. God bless her. She is also a Cleveland Browns fan. I kid you not. This was relayed to me last night in pictures and in tweets from Liz Truss over the years. I don't know how that happened. but it tells me her soul is firm, her resolution unwavering. It tells me that hope does not die easily in that prime minister. So I'm pleased about that. We also got to talk last night about the other big story of the morning. A special master was appointed yesterday by Judge Cannon in Florida. I got to talk about her to Brett last night. I'm very pleased with this. It doesn't mean the president wins, former President Trump wins. It doesn't mean that he loses. It means that a fair party about whom there is no suspicion will be appointed. Cut number 18 from last night's special report on Fox News with Brett Baer.
Quickly, Hugh, a big win for the Trump legal team today. The special master being appointed after all the pundits everywhere were saying there's no way this is going to happen. It happened.
Judge Cannon is a graduate of my law school. If Harold was on, we'd be talking about the University of Michigan putting another good judge on the bench. The key part of her ruling is that this is unique circumstances. Documents have been seized from a former president of the United States who has 7 years of clobbering back and forth with the FBI and the DOJ. Let's bring in a third party to see which of those 11,000 documents ought to have been taken. It's not necessarily a victory for him yet. It depends on what the special master gives back, what the special master keeps, but it's certainly the only way for him to get a victory over the DOJ and FBI and questioning their motives.
Yeah, it's the only way that he could have ever gotten, and we as the public could ever receive, a fair and unbiased and trustworthy assessment of whether or not that raid was legit. I also got to talk about Biden on MAGA last night, Biden, MAGA, and other points on special report last night. Cut number 17.
Hugh, he's hitting numerous times today on going after the MAGA Republicans, following on that speech he gave in front of Independence Hall. Your thoughts on stirring the base that way and what implications it has politically?
I think it's faceplant after faceplant, Brett. We go back to the semi-fascist slur. Then we go forward to the student loan bailout. Then we go forward to the red setting, the red wedding speech, which was a much panned by everyone who was objective about it. And today you have the Wisconsin Democratic senator candidate not showing up with the president, like Tim Ryan in Ohio. They don't want to be anywhere near him. He got 38% approval. It's falling. He can always get, a crowd. He's president of the United States. People want to see him. Even people that don't like him, but some union guys will show up, et cetera. But I think it's been a disastrous start to the Labor Day campaign, and we'll talk later of specific races, I think. But right now, you'd rather have the Republican cards than the Democratic cards, and you'd rather be led by Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy than Joe Biden.
Yes, you would. And we came back one more time. Cut 19.
USA Today, Hugh, asset or liability? Biden's momentum hasn't led to new invitations on midterm campaign trail. Biden has trips to 3 Senate battlegrounds, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, we saw him today, and Ohio later this week.
Well, the earlier number that Morgan put out, 70% wrong direction, that's the key. Lagging indicators are polls. I don't think so much of polls. I do look at races in the Senate, and I feel much better than I did a month ago. Herschel Walker has caught and surpassed Raphael Warnock in Georgia, not by a lot, but by a little. And people just genuinely like Herschel. I look out at Arizona. Blake Masters has closed to within 4 points. And I think Mark Kelly is at risk of getting caught in the wave. I think Dr. Oz has got a lot of momentum. And meanwhile, new states have come into play in the Senate race, especially Colorado with Joe O'Dea. And I think we also will see New Hampshire tighten up after they have a nominee in 10 days. All told, the president threw everything into the student loan bailout, and it blew up in his hands. He tried again with that speech in Philadelphia. It blew up in his hands. He's out there trying as best he can, but there's a reason people don't show up with him, Brett, because he is an anchor on their electability. And while I think it's a good thing for Democrats to say we're going to win the House, that's a joke, and we all know that's a joke. Tom Emmer's is right. It's just a question of whether Kevin McCarthy has 10 or 25 seat margin.
That's it. It's just how big is the margin going to be? Let's play a little bit of President Biden to be fair to him, because after all, the president was speaking yesterday. Cut number 2.
I also signed the Chip and Science Act, a groundbreaking law. Will once again manufacture semiconductor chips that power every day, everything, our smartphones, dishwashers, automobiles, national security stuff, right here in America. Guess what? We invented it here. We invented it here. In America. By the way, the reason why last year inflation was so high, the biggest reason? Cost of automobiles. You know why they cost so much? that didn't have the computer chips to make the automobiles.
All right, there you have the president's grasp on inflation is non-existent. It just isn't. He doesn't have too much money chasing too few goods. Yeah, there were fewer automobiles than we would have liked, but a lot of them were used automobiles that were not there, that had nothing to do with chips not being there. Honestly, every day is a gift from Joe Biden. And we have 60 more days of gift giving from President Biden. Stay tuned, America. It's Tuesday. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The campaign has begun. Glory, America. Bonjour. Hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live mid-coast Maine, where it's just raining. It's raining, or it feels like it's raining at the Department of Justice and FBI this morning with the ruling yesterday by the Judge Cannon in Federal District Court in Florida that a special master is indeed appropriate, and a process is put in place to select one to review the documents seized from former President Trump. 11,000 documents, and we will see what comes back. I'm joined by Byron York of the Washington Examiner, who has followed this, as well as the 7-year campaign against Donald Trump by people in authority. Good morning, Byron. What did you make of the judge's ruling yesterday?
Good morning, Hugh. Well, I thought it was a reasonable ruling. It wasn't across the board. You know, the House Democrats had asked the intelligence community to do an assessment of whether there was any damage to national security from Trump's keeping these classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, and that's going to continue. The judge specifically said they can continue doing that. So it struck me as something that would delay the Justice Department a little bit, but also bring more fairness to the process. And I especially thought so after the judge released her order yesterday. And apparently the Justice Department had been required to give the court a report on what it had seized at Mar-a-Lago, and we found out stuff we didn't know. And she said, according to the Privilege Review Team's report, that's what the Justice Department gave to the judge, the seized materials include medical documents, correspondence related to taxes, and accounting information. The government has also acknowledged that it seized personal effects without evidentiary value and, by its own estimation, upwards of 500 pages of material potentially subject to attorney-client privilege. So I thought having a second pair of eyes on that would be entirely reasonable. Now, I will say I follow Democratic Twitter, Democratic legal Twitter, and they just flipped out about this yesterday. I mean, they were extremely upset about how horrible a ruling it was and what a terrible judge this was, and what a blow to the rule of law this was. And I have to say I was a little surprised by all that.
I was not surprised because it is a huge defeat for justice, but it isn't a win for President Trump. If I could, I want to play for you what I said to Brett Baer last night, very quickly about this. Cut number 18 when I was asked by Brett on Special Report last night.
Quickly, Hugh, a big win for the Trump legal team today. The special master being appointed after all the pundits everywhere were saying there's no way this is going to happen. It happened.
Judge Cannon is a graduate of my law school. If Harold was on, we'd be talking about the University of Michigan putting another good judge on the bench. The key part of her ruling is that this is unique circumstances. Documents have been seized from a former president of the United States who has 7 years of clobbering back and forth with the FBI and the DOJ. Let's bring in a third party to see which of those 11,000 documents ought to have been taken. It's not necessarily a victory for him yet. It depends on what the special master gives back, what the special master keeps, but it's certainly the only way for him to get a victory over the DOJ and FBI in questioning their motives.
So, like a monopoly board, Byron, we're somewhere on the board. We don't know how it's going to end up, but it can't go well for justice if even one document is returned, much less 100, much less 500 or 1,000 pages of documents. That's a black eye. But
because you have to remember, the Justice Department has already gone through this stuff and are using this stuff. Yes. And if it turns out that the special master says something cannot be used, and the Justice Department has already been using it, the prosecution team has already seen it and made use of it, that's going to be a big problem. Although we should say, again, there's stuff the Justice Department can keep doing. They can keep interviewing witnesses, for example. And, one of the big parts about if this is just a full-scale investigation targeted toward a possible indictment, as it appears to be, there's a lot of interviews they're going to be doing. So I don't get, other than a belief or a desire to keep this thing in the news all the way through Election Day, I'm not sure why people are quite that upset about it.
Look, they've been leaking. The Department of Justice has been leaking. They leaked to Maggie Haberman that no immediate prosecution was happening and none might ever come. That was a giveaway to me. That was a poker tell that this is political to some degree. I've always been saying, look, they've got the documents. We know the statutes that they brought into play. And I agree with Attorney General Barr, by the way. If there is a top secret SCI document there, a special access program is another SAP, TSI, SAP are the worst. There's no excuse. If there are covers of those old documents that got thrown in, and by the way, you can find them at the Nixon Library because lots of covers get left behind. Covers don't mean documents. Covers mean covers. That will be a huge black eye for DOJ. If the DOJ arranged those documents for that photo, it will be a black eye. All this does is keep Trump in the fight and able to make the speeches that he makes. It is not dispositive, Byron, of either case.
No, it's not dispositive, and I think we've talked about this before, is in terms of keeping Trump in the fight, and he talked about it at length in his speech in Pennsylvania because he talked about everything at length. But I think this allows him to reinforce the view among his supporters that he has been unfairly targeted for years by the FBI, which is true. And that it's continuing now, that it fits, because when Trump supporters heard this, to them it fit into a pattern of everything they heard from 2016 through 2019 with the Russia investigation and the Mueller report.
And it might not be that, but it sure does look, it rhymes, right? It rhymes. And when it rhymes, you say to yourself, okay. And the judge referred to the particular circumstances of a former president having a warrant served on his private residence as being one of her factors. And I believe that is true. I also noted in the New York Times coverage of this, they noted for, I think, the first time in a subhead that I can remember, that it was a Trump appointee. We never get when it's liberal judges in the Ninth Circuit doing crazy stuff, we never got, Judge Reinhardt was appointed in the last month of the Carter administration. We never got that stuff. Now all of a sudden it matters that Judge Cannon is a Trump appointee, Byron York.
Yes, it does. By the way, I went and looked at her confirmation, which was bipartisan. People like Tom Carper, Chris Coons voted to confirm her. I mean, she's a Article III Senate confirmed judge. Now there are about 20 to 25 members who weren't even there, but she got 58 votes. And even if everybody had been in the Senate, I think that would have been a bipartisan total. So, I mean, she was appointed by Donald Trump, but she was confirmed on a bipartisan vote in the Senate, even though bipartisanship is not required to confirm a judge in the Senate. We've seen that before, but she was.
I hope they keep attacking her because she is a University of Michigan Law School grad, so it's my alma mater. Harold Ford and I love it when we get Wolverine judges on the bench. But she's got an exemplary record. She did a lot before she got there. She was at Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher. I believe she did some time at DOJ. Big law school, big credentials, big confirmation vote. And she did a smart thing. And by the way, it will be reviewable by the circuit court if DOJ dares take it up. I don't think they dare take it up.
I tell you what, if this stands and the Justice Department ultimately does indict President Trump, one of the things they're going to say, as Democrats will say as an argument, is, look, we even appointed a special master, a disinterested outside party to go through all this evidence. And now that we're indicting him, we've bent over backwards to be fair. Believe me, if they indict him, they're going to be citing this decision.
It fascinates me because the fruit of the poison tree will come in and the, quote, review team, the legitimacy of the review team's review will come in. If they held back things they ought to have immediately turned back, like the personal effects doctrine. However, if they turn back 10 pages of documents or 4 documents and they keep the rest, that's not good for Trump. it's not a complete home run. They got a first down. That's what Trump got a first down in a game where he's got to score.
Well, I mean, he'd been losing every play before.
Yes.
So it is progress. But listen, I think it seems clear that he did have classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, and the question has always been, what are they about? And we've talked in the past about overclassification with government documents. We don't know if these are documents that any reasonable person would say were overclassified, or maybe they weren't overclassified. Maybe they were really, really big, sensitive stuff. So
which would be a disaster for him. And we don't know how much involvement he had in the actual cartoning up of the document. His lawyers have got a lot of explaining to do. Byron York, because they signed the affidavits. Morning glory, America. Bones roar high. Canada, welcome to the first day of the official sprint to the end of the campaign season 2022. I'm joined by GOP Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman. Great to have you back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Always great to be with you, Hugh. Thanks for having me.
I just had Josh Kraushaar of Axios on, and I presented him the Rawlsian test. If he had to pick a red card or a blue card in the House and in the Senate, not knowing which race, just that it was one of the competitive ones, which one would he want? In both cases, he picked the red card, meaning that the general environment is pretty good. How do you feel about the beginning of the campaign season?
Yeah, I feel optimistic. I think coming into September, voters are dialing in, and Biden last week with his divisive speech as he stood in front of the American people, fear-mongering and not talking about any achievements from his administration instead of just attacking Republicans. I think it bodes well that they don't have anything to run on, and Republicans have a lot to run on.
3 weeks ago, he was calling Republicans semi-fascist. 2 weeks ago, he unloaded up to $1 trillion in debt for student loan bailouts. Last week, there was the red-setting speech, which was a disaster. And then yesterday, the Senate candidate for the Democrats in Wisconsin wouldn't show up with him. Tell me about those four omens, Ronna McDaniel. How do you read those?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Mandela Barnes wouldn't show up with him, that Democrats are fleeing Biden, his numbers are terrible. I think everybody saw his speech as divisive. Remember, this is a president who gave an inaugural address talking about unifying Americans and we need to bring people together, and how quickly it has devolved 2 years later into him calling half the country fascist and an enemy of the democracy. So I think all of that shows Democrats are not feeling good about campaigning with Joe Biden, and Republicans are looking good heading into this midterms. But we can't take anything for granted. You know, the Democrats have big tech, they have the media. The media carries Joe Biden's talking points to a T, and we need to be vigilant and get out and support our candidates, support them financially, volunteer, and do everything we can to win in these midterms.
Now, Republicans are talking about affordability. They're referring to inflation in groceries and gas and generally in rent and in cost of living. They're talking about crime because people are genuinely scared to go into different places or places they do not know, and not even in their own homes are they resting secure. They're talking about immigration and the collapse at the border. They're talking about a lot of things. Democrats talk about abortion, then they talk about abortion, then they talk about abortion. Republicans can talk about abortion, but they really do want to stay on the pocketbook issues because it's been a disaster for Americans. What are you advising candidates to talk most about?
Well, the economy is the number one thing on people's minds. And affordability, like you said, not just groceries and gas, but rent, insurance, everything is up. Every single place you look as a homeowner, as a hardworking American, things are costing more for you right now, and that's because of the Biden administration. So that's number one. Crime is a big issue. I'll tell you what, Hugh, education is a big issue. We are now learning about the deficits our children have faced coming out of the pandemic, being kept out of the classroom. We know about the mental health issues. And we just watched Joe Biden say, you know what, instead of helping the kids we left behind, we're going to try and buy votes from kids who've already graduated from Harvard and Yale by giving them loan forgiveness. That's wrong. And I think that is really turning the tide for us with a lot of voters who fundamentally feel like this loan forgiveness is unfair and the wrong priority for the Biden administration, especially when we know millions of kids left the classroom and there's been chronic absenteeism and there's a huge education crisis in this country with kids facing deficits that will impact their ability to have a living and make the money they would have made if Democrats hadn't locked their states down.
You know, Ronna, Brett Baer was telling me a couple of weeks ago on his show that it seemed to him that the Democrats have made a big bet. Their big bet is on semi-fascist and fascism in the red setting speech, and that they're just going to stick with this despite the overwhelming rejection of it. I don't think they are sticking with underlining the student loan bailout, because the president has had 3 opportunities to talk about that. He did not talk about it in the red setting speech. He just didn't even, a week earlier, this was the greatest thing since sliced bread. They got a week of blowback from ordinary Americans saying, are you out of your mind? And then they've dropped it, but it's too late. It's $1 trillion and it's inflationary.
It's too late. And what we've seen, Hugh, since then is Herschel Walker took a lead in a poll in Georgia. We've seen Laxalt within 1, O'Day in Colorado within 1. We're seeing movement after that decision that the Democrats made to pay off $1 trillion in student loan debt for people who willingly took that debt on, right? But our kids, and I'm one of them, who were kept out of the classroom, who had no choice, who couldn't get the education they deserved, they're behind in math, they're behind on their SAT and ACT scores, and it's going to impact them for their lives. And Democrats said, we're going to pay off these loans because maybe this will lead to votes, instead of helping these kids who our policies have left behind and made them collateral damage because of our loyalty to the public unions and the teacher unions. Not the teachers. The teachers are working hard. It's the unions that the Democrats are beholden to. And the unions definitely show they don't care about our kids.
I urge my audience every day, Ronna McDaniel, do not vote for one school board incumbent in any district anywhere. Whether there's R or D or no, they're usually nonpartisan races. Not one incumbent unless you're absolutely certain that they are adamant against making masks non-mandatory and never closing school again. That was the biggest disaster. And by the way, England did not make that disaster. I was blessed to have a grandson and a granddaughter in English schools for a year because the Navy sent my son-in-law and daughter there for a year, and they got to go to school. It was a completely self-inflicted wound because of the school teachers' unions and the fact that Democrats in Congress, I mean, Patty Murray yesterday wouldn't back down in Dana Bash interview. She would not admit error.
No, and it was done in Democrat states. Listen, my brother lives in Florida. His kids, my nieces, they were in school. My son in Michigan was not. And the difference between what they were able to do, their high school experience, was so profound. But look at these SAT scores. Look at what the deficits are for the kids in the lockdown states versus the states that were open. And the states that were open were run by Republican governors. And those are the states that are leading the charge, not just on education, but on jobs recovered, on economic opportunity. Those are the states that are really doing well. So if you want to look at what Republican policies do versus Democrat policies, go look at states by Republican governors.
Now, Democrats do want to talk about nothing but abortion. I'm very happy with the Dobbs decision. It returns the decision to the state legislatures where it ought to be. California is not going to be Ohio, is not going to be Connecticut, is not going to be Florida. I think the Florida compromise may, in fact, end up being the majority position of state legislatures, but I don't know. But I also don't believe Democrats are going to gain any, because voters are smart. They know this is no longer a federal issue.
Yeah, it's going to be returned to the voters. Voters will make the decision what's best for their state through their legislature. And like you said, Mississippi is different than California. And by the way, nothing's changed in California. California, you can still go get an abortion on a baby's due date, which I think most Americans absolutely believe that there should be limitations. And that is where the Democrat Party refuses to engage. They cannot say, when is it enough? When should there be a limitation? Don't you think the day that the baby can be born, when someone can adopt that baby, that it is a life, that it is feeling pain, that we shouldn't be allowing abortion? Choice is over at that point, and Democrats won't engage. And it's going to end up being a compromise and consensus across every state, but it is a 10th Amendment issue, and it should not have been adjudicated at the Supreme Court level.
Let me close by talking about the media with you, Ronna McDaniel. I'm looking at an NBC story by Henry Gomez, pretty good reporter, then John Allen, Natasha Korecki, Sahil Kapoor, and Adam Edelman. And the rest of those are all lefties. And it's just nuts. It's like they were doing peyote last night. They say the Republicans are in trouble in the Senate and they had a summer slump. Dr. Oz has closed, as you mentioned, Joe Day has closed, Blake Masters has closed, Herschel Walker is ahead in 2 polls. And I don't care about the specifics of polls, the only direction, because they never polled Republicans correctly. This is just nuts, but the media will not relent. I don't expect them to relent a minute in the next 63 days.
No, because they're trying to depress fundraising for Republicans and increase optimism for their Democrat candidates, like Fetterman, who's a socialist. So what I would say to everyone listening, go give to J.D. Vance and Oz and Herschel and Adam Laxalt and Ted Budd and Tiffany Smiley and Joe O'Dea and support these candidates.
And Blake Masters. You forgot one. Blake Masters.
I'm sorry I forgot Blake. I'm going to be with Blake, who's doing a great job. But we have great candidates. And the media is setting up this narrative because they want to depress fundraising. The one place they do have an advantage is fundraising. So everyone needs to get out $5, $10, whatever you can do to support these candidates. It will help them absolutely get their message across and win these races.
Ronna McDaniel, thank you. Keep coming back at GOP Chairwoman. If you want to follow Ronna, and you've got to follow her, she keeps up a travel schedule unlike any other for the next 60 days. At GOP Chairwoman on Twitter. Thank you, Ronna. I'll be right back, America. 1-800-520-1234. I'd rather have the red hand than the blue hand right now, but what do you think? 1-800-520-1234. Much rather. Leader of the Republican Study Committee and very likely a member of future Speaker Kevin McCarthy's leadership team come January. I wanted to talk to Jim Banks on a weekend after Indiana won in a football game. They beat the Fighting Illini on Friday. And so it's very rare to get to talk to Jim Banks after his alma mater has won a football game. Good morning, Congressman. Let me congratulate you on being perfect for maybe the last week of the year.
Undefeated Indiana football, who would have ever thought? And at the same time, the Boilermakers lost to Penn State. So for us Hoosier fans, it was a good football weekend.
It was sweet. I haven't heard anything from Hendricks, by the way, our mutual friend Jerry Hendricks, since Purdue went down fighting. But Congressman Banks, I saw you in Wyoming a couple of weeks ago. I want to catch up with you. As head of the RSC, you lead the largest caucus. That's a policy caucus in the House. But you're also very likely going to be in House leadership. I heard affordability, the economy, crime, immigration. I know what the issue set is, rebuilding our national military strength. But I know the Democrats are out there talking about abortion, 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 abortion. Is that going to work, or is Joe Biden's fascist, red-setting speech going to work, or the student loan bailout going to work? What do you think is going to be the message for Republicans looking to add to the GOP numbers in the House?
Well, Hugh, there is sort of this internal debate among Republicans. Do we just run against Joe Biden, or do we present our own positive agenda for America? And that's what Kevin McCarthy is going to do next week. We're going to go to Pennsylvania as a Republican conference. We're going to unveil the Commitment to America, which was a member-led initiative that Leader McCarthy orchestrated, where members got together in a room. We had task forces. And across the board, we will present our agenda that we will run on through the tape to the midterm election on November 8th. So I believe when we do that, when we go out and articulate that vision, and by the way, that vision is largely going back to the policies that we know that work from the Trump era: peace through strength and peace in the Middle East, $2.50 for a gallon of gas through energy independence, a secure border, law and order, and funding the police and supporting our police officers. Those are the policies that will appeal to the American people. And I think when we do that, you'll see our generic ballot numbers go back up to what they were earlier in the summer as we present that positive agenda. Those Republican leaders who think that we should just focus on Joe Biden and run against Joe Biden, I think are missing a larger point, that if we present a positive agenda, we're not just going to win a majority. We're going to win a majority that we're going to keep for a long time to come.
I want to do both, because I think the president is a disaster, and I believe the semi-fascist rhetoric and then the red-setting speech were terrible for the American Republic. And I also believe the student loan bailout is a new agenda item that you couldn't have planned on because it's so awful. Are you going to add that to the commitment?
Well, it has to be. Yeah, yes. And Virginia Fox, who's our ranking member, was the former chair, will be the chair again of the Education and Labor Committee. But she's got initiatives that will bring down the cost of college education and hold universities accountable to bring down student loan costs. So that's the right way to do it. And through the policies that we'll present in that commitment next week, I think you'll see substance behind the talking points. But you're right. I mean, the American people, over 80% of Americans say that America is on the wrong track. And Joe Biden's numbers are upside down. And he's been the worst president, if not of a lifetime, of American history. A weak commander-in-chief that's invited our adversaries to act out in ways that we haven't seen before as well. So there's much to run against, but my larger point is we need to back it up with policies of our own, and that's what I'm excited. That's what we're going to do next week, surrounded by rank-and-file members from all over the country as we unveil this commitment.
Now, Jim Banks, when I got a few minutes with the leader, I urged only one select committee. I know select committees are a dangerous thing, but I want a select committee not into the 20-year war with Afghanistan, but in the 2 months leading up to the catastrophic bug out. Because that sears. It remains a terrible burden on the American conscience. It remains an invitation to our enemies to believe that the White House is weak. And we got to find out, why did that happen? Do you think that's possible?
Well, I do. And this is a larger point about the philosophy of how the House of Representatives should operate to begin with. Every single committee has oversight powers and authorities and responsibilities. So on the Armed Services Committee, we will launch into investigations about Afghanistan, the withdrawal, everything leading up to it. And you're right. I remember going to the Munich Security Conference earlier this year, shortly after the disaster that happened in Afghanistan. And Afghanistan was the black cloud that hung over every room that we were in, with allies, with more adversarial countries. The rest of the world looked at America different after Afghanistan than what they did before. Adversaries didn't fear us, and our allies lacked respect for us. So the fallout of that is something we're going to feel for a very long time. But you're right about we don't need select committees. We need the committees to operate the way that they should, the way that they haven't. In Pelosi's led Congress, they provided no oversight or accountability of this administration. That'll be a primary duty, a moral responsibility of a House Republican-led majority next Congress is to provide that type of oversight.
No, I'll keep pounding the table. We may disagree here because I want the American people to focus on one thing and one thing only: what happened in those 60 days that led up to the catastrophe. Armed services can do oversight, but I really would like a select committee on that. Let me turn, though, to campaigning. I've had the pleasure of meeting Amanda Banks, and I know that as a wife and a mother, she's 100% with you. What happened to the Banks children during the shutdown? Because I watched with my jaw on the desk, Patty Murray yesterday refused to say that the shutdown of schools was a disaster when she was on with Dana Bash. And I'm sure Tiffany Smiley went up 5 points yesterday because Patty Murray defended the schools as being, well, they didn't know what to do. We knew that was a disaster after 2 months, Jim Banks. What happened to the Banks children during the shutdown?
Yeah, we have three daughters, Hugh, 13, 11, and 9, so pray for us with what lies ahead. But what they went through the pandemic was catastrophic. It was emotional. It was our kids were the biggest losers through the pandemic of anybody, and we had to make decisions in a hurry about enrolling them in a small private Christian school in our hometown to get them in the classroom, and the stress that placed on our family, on our kids, on Amanda, my wife. That's the stress that moms and kids and families all over America were feeling. So those Democrats who are completely tone deaf to what their actions, their policies did, and what it caused to families, and how it held our kids back. I mean, in subjects like math and science, kids lagging because of that 2-year period of time through the pandemic where they weren't educated in the classroom is something that is an effect America is going to feel for a long time to come.
Now, I think moms and dads everywhere know this. I believe it's the hidden decisive factor in these elections. And I keep telling everyone, do not vote for one school board incumbent anywhere. They're not R&Ds. They run as nonpartisan, but do not vote for an incumbent unless you are absolutely certain that they spoke out against and did everything they could to stop the closures of schools and have done everything they can to make masks a voluntary thing, not mandatory, because they inhibit learning. There's got to be accountability. And Jim Banks, not one Democrat. I don't think one Democrat has dared to come out and stand against teachers' unions. They own the Democratic Party along with the legacy media.
Yeah, they really do. I mean, the teachers' unions across the country they're ultimately responsible for these policies. They control these Democrats. They control these school boards where they funded these school board members to act on their behalf. And it's shameful. The good news, Hugh, is that I think by and large the American people get it. They see it. They feel it. You saw it in Governor Youngkin's election in Virginia. That was a year before the midterm, but I think those feelings and that sentiment carry on to this day. It's going to have a big impact on this upcoming midterm election too.
Of course, Democrats want to talk about Donald Trump the whole time, too. I'm never afraid to talk about Donald Trump because of the achievements that he did with Operation Warp Speed, mostly the Abraham Accords, also the 3 justices on the Supreme Court. But they want to talk about 1-6, and I think the 1-6 committee was illegitimate. You were supposed to be the ranking Republican on that. That was vetoed. That committee became illegitimate from that moment forward. Jim Banks, Donald Trump won a victory of sorts. A special master matters, but it's not decisive. It depends on what the special master rules. But everybody in the media told us that wasn't going to happen. We just can't trust the media on anything related to Trump.
You really can. I mean, the record speaks for itself. And, you know, where I come from in Northeast Indiana, my voters, they see and hear this repeatedly over and over again. This is why they were so outraged by the fallout of the FBI raid at Mar-a-Lago and being told that it was about one thing and now finding out it's about something else that's highly politicized. So at the end of the day, the public deserves answers. We deserve to know why they did what they did in an unprecedented way to raid the home of a former president, and hopefully this decision will lead to that in a very short period of time.
So let's put a bow on it. When do the Republicans get together to reveal the commitment document?
We do it early next week, so we're right around the corner. I'm excited about it. We're going to do it in Pennsylvania. More details to come, but as you know, I've been all over the country. I've been campaigning with candidates, and just the last few weeks in Iowa, Jeremy Schaefer in Pennsylvania. Of course, we have one of the best candidates in the country, Jennifer Ruth Green, in the 1st District of Indiana. I leave today with Leader McCarthy to go to Texas to campaign throughout the state of Texas over the next couple of weeks, and our voters are energized. The media is trying to diminish it and distract from it, but our voters are definitely energized, and when we put that agenda out, it's going to give our candidates a strong platform over the next 8 weeks to run on policies that we know work and also are popular with the American people. Jen
Ruth Green is terrific. I'm coming back with Eli Crane, another combat veteran of the war, like you, deployed to combat zone again and again. We've got a great lineup, Congressman Banks. And I say we because I'm a Republican and everybody knows it. It's a great lineup of candidates.
Yeah, Eli Crane, another exciting candidate, not just a veteran, but his business experience is something that we can use greatly in Congress. As I already said, Jennifer Ruth Green, I mean, she served in Iraq for the surge and happens to be African American in a African American district in the 1st District of Indiana, Gary, East Chicago. That's a district that Republicans haven't held for almost 100 years, and she's the best candidate we've ever had to compete in a district like that. Zach Nunn, I saw him in Iowa last week, and Jeremy Schaefer, Jim Bugnett in Pennsylvania. So we really do have the best candidates I've ever seen, at least since I've been involved, and that's what it takes: good candidates, a good platform, and it just happens to be at a period of time when the American people are fed up with the policies from the left and a president who's been just a complete disaster.
So get out your pocketbooks and be generous. I just tweeted out Jim Banks' campaign headquarters. He's not going to spend that money on his own district. He's going to make sure it goes wherever it's needed. So go and make your contribution to Jim Banks. Congressman, great to speak with you. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Hugh. Good to be with you.